Welcome back to Out of the Fog. Well, it's been a while since we've heard from my next guest, and their timing couldn't be better. With the budget coming down next week, news breaking last night that RNC Chief Bill James is leaving, and news of over 90 health positions being cut. So here to weigh in is the Telegram's political reporter, James McLeod. Welcome back to the studio.
Great to be here.
It was great to have you here. So let's start with RNC Chief Bill James. Big news last night, breaking news that he is retiring in June.
Yeah, kind of out of left field, although, I mean, given everything that's going on, it sort of makes sense.
Right. So a lot of the criticism, obviously, and when you think of what has taken place, even within the last year for the RNC. So I guess a lot of questions as to the timing of his decision, I guess. Yeah,
well, and I mean, with any one of these departures, we're always told it has nothing to do with anything else. It's a personal thing. It's that time of in your life, spending more time with your family, on and on and on. And personally, I always believe that to a point. Like, I honestly believe that someone of Bill James' stature, who's been a police officer since, I believe, 1985, is there's going to be a lot more than the controversy of the last year going into that decision. But between the Snellgrove situation, where you've got a police officer accused of sexual assault on duty, and that case is now up for appeal, you've got the Dunphy inquiry, you've got the Tim Buckles situation with the whole investigation.
Yeah, that investigation taking place. Yeah.
On and on and on. Like, there has been a lot, and one of the most telling things to me was at the Dunphy inquiry, there were text messages between Joe Smythe and Tim Buckle back and forth, where they were specifically criticizing Chief James's approach to defending his officers, public communication. I think there was something about, like, well, you didn't expect him to become an orator overnight just because of this situation. It was clear from the tone of that he may not have entirely had the, like, internally there were some criticisms there. So all of it piling up, it does seem like timing is a factor.
And so I guess one of the questions is, what happens now? Who fills that position? I think Jim Carroll was one name that was handed out, but I think he also said that he's going to be retiring.
Well, interestingly, Justice Minister Andrew Parsons spoke a little bit about this today, and he said that this will be one of the positions that will go through the Independent Appointments Commission, the Liberal signature sort of transparency and accountability thing, and so like anyone can apply for this thing. Well, I'm not sure. I think there's some stuff in the law. You probably have to be a police officer, but Parsons said he'd be very interested in hearing from applicants within the RNC, but also outside the RNC, which struck me as pretty interesting. And he also talked about the fact that not just the new chief, but in a big part, the new chief is going to be responsible for regaining public confidence and sort of addressing the issues that the police have been wrestling with for the last year. I mean, it's inevitable given what's gone on, but whoever comes into that role, that's going to be a big part of their job.
So maybe looking at a different approach as they
A different approach? I mean, you never know. It could be someone outside the RNC, which isn't something that I believe we've sort of seen in recent years. But yeah, I don't know what to expect, but it'll be interesting to watch it play out.
All right, let's move on to the throne speech, which took place earlier this week. I'm just curious as to what your take on that was. Of course, that's where, you know, the priorities of the government are laid out, what's to come. Talks of Muskrat Falls as to it's too late really to stop now. It'll be worse in the future if it was to stop now and such. So what was your main takeaway from the throne speech?
Well, the province is broke, and it's good we weren't paying Frank Fagan by the word, because it was long. It was really, really long. And there was very little in there that was new. The most striking thing to me about it was the fact that, like, the media gets this half an hour beforehand, and we're all sitting in the basement of Confederation Building flipping through it, and it was like, okay, they're congratulating him on Breyer, they're congratulating Come From Away, they're
looking for some positivity, yeah, I guess.
But looking for something new, and the biggest statement for me in this was that it was just a rehash of things they'd already said, specifically this the way forward document, which the Liberal government is very clearly and loudly saying, if you want to know what we're doing, if you want to know what we're planning, if you want to know what our priorities are, this is where to look.
So they seem to be really sticking with that specific plan and the language that they're using.
Yes, so, I mean, and their new updated way forward thing was released one day before the throne speech, and then the throne speech basically said, look in the way forward, look in the way forward. It's all right there in the way forward. So, I mean, that lays out more in the way of specifics, but the way forward document was criticized for being a little bit fluffy and a little bit vague. Really, I think everyone is just waiting for next week. And, you know, when you actually see the dollars and cents, the budget, you know, that's what's going to tell the tale.
So nothing new that came out of this speech
No, I mean, you talked about the Nalcor thing.
Yeah.
They've been saying we can't cancel Nalcor we can't cancel Nalcor, but we can't cancel Muskrat Falls. Like, that's what Stan Marshall's been saying basically since he took the job. And anyone who's been following this, I mean, we signed some contracts and we've spent a lot of money, and Holyrood is old and keeps breaking on us. So one way or another, like, we do need something else. And but yeah.
and there's a lot with doing more with less. Seems to be a tagline that you were hearing a
Also,
lot.
have you heard that they're running a flatter, leaner government?
Yes,
That is,
yes.
yeah, if I had a nickel for every time I heard flatter, leaner management, I would be able to balance the Newfoundland Labrador deficit.
So speaking of the deficit, and it is a huge deficit, and when we look towards next week, Budget Day, which is a week away today, what are you kind of expecting to see? Obviously, there's been lots of talks in regards to cuts in you know, the public sector. We've seen health cuts already come this week, possibly, maybe more next week.
The health cuts were interesting, and so the big picture here is last year, when the budget was delivered, it was about a $1.8 billion deficit, which is huge. And because oil went up a little bit and things went well, that was knocked down to about $1.6 billion in the mid-year fiscal update. They're supposed to meet their deficit reduction targets, they're supposed to cut that down to $800 million this coming year. So that's a big gap. What's also significant is, again and again, the finance minister and the premier have said there will be no tax increases, there will be no new fees. So,
which doesn't leave much room for...
Yeah, you've basically got to cut spending, and the biggest thing government spends money on is paying salaries for public sector workers. I don't have any sort of inside sources that are telling me things at this point, but what I would say is that a lot of the management cuts have all been around that 20% mark. Like, and in a lot of these things, when they cut the deputy ministers, the assistant deputy ministers, the communication staff, and now in Eastern Health, they've always emphasized in the news release, this is about 20% or 18% or 23% reduction in the management ranks here. So it's hard to say if that's going to translate into the wider public service, but that might be something to watch. And if you're going to really cut that kind of money, there's not really a whole lot of other ways to do it than laying off workers. The other factor to keep an eye on in all of this is relationships between the government and the public sector unions are poisonous right now. And so what they do in the budget, if there's big layoffs, that'll only make it worse.
Okay, well, James, we have to leave it right there. We're all out of time already. Lots always to discuss here with you. Thanks very much, and I'm sure everybody will be tuning in to your reporting on Budget Day. Of course, you can tune into the Telegram, both online and in print. I remember to say that today. Thanks very much for your time.
Great to be here.
All right, folks, we're going to take a very short break, but we'll be right back. Stay with us.